and I didn't want to be an actor anymore. Do you know about Padre Pio? And of course, I didn't know anything about Padre Pio.
Most of these stories of saints in the faith were f***ups. Full-blown f***ups.
I found myself in a godly position often, right? Where I was in charge. How do you use your suffering to tap into your joy? I had a gun on the table. I was out of here. I didn't want to be alive anymore when all of this happened.
Shia LaBeouf grew up on our screens, rocketed to global box office stature, and then imploded before the very cameras that once idolized him. This is the story of a man the world canceled, but God called. In this video, we track his public collapse and the grace that met him where no one expected. A monastery, a role he didn't ask for, and a faith he never thought he'd find.
You know, I walked into this, my life was on fire. I was walking out of hell. It wasn't like I willingly came in here on a white horse singing show tunes. I came in here on fire, and I didn't want to be an actor anymore, and my life was a mess, complete mess, and I had hurt a lot of people, and I felt deep shame, deep guilt. I didn't like to go outside much. I had a yearning not to be here anymore. You know, I was on my way out.
Is that where you were when you accepted the role of Padre Pio?
This is why when you spoke about the role, I wanted to kind of dive in there because it's kind of formative to how this all happened to me. I was willing because pain made me willing to go about this in a different way than I had previously. You know, my opinion about God before this happened, before the pain struck, before my world had crumbled was art, love, and God, they all mean the same thing. They're synonymous. And as an artist who creates art, I found myself in a godly position often, right? Where I was in charge. And I had also been told my whole life, like, your life is your life. You have to make with it what you can, you know? You gotta be a good guy, and then you gotta get married, and then you gotta get a house, and you gotta get a job, and do good at your job, and like, your life is your life, and things will work out if you put effort in, and you know, it's up to you. And I always really felt that, and it made it hard to believe in God.
He scrolls through lawsuits and death wishes. Then a message appears, an invitation to play a little-known saint. It feels absurd, yet impossibly timely. He clicks accept, not to act, but to escape. This wasn't casting. It was a confrontation. He thought he was researching a saint, but the saint was already studying him. What he didn't know is that this casting call is a rescue line, nodded by Providence.
You had to actually, it's why it feels like celestial mathematics or some kind of divine, it feels way, too coincidental to be a coincidence. But my life was completely, like I told you, on fire, and I'm in a spiritual program where I go on Zoom and we have meetings, and another person that was in this meeting, who's also part of this same fellowship of like the down and outs, was a man named Abel Ferreira. And he wound up seeing me in the meeting. We shared sensibilities. We had heard each other share a few times. And then he wrote me in the chat box, do you know about Padre Pio? And of course, I didn't know anything about Padre Pio.
This is before the offer of the film. It's just, okay.
This had been gestating on his side for years because his grandfather comes from the same region in Pietrelcina, and he has a connection to Pio in many different ways. He's not a Catholic, he's a Buddhist, which I always had trouble with as a person who was always self, and now, I'm not gonna get into that conversation, but me and him have wrestled over this many times. And I thought, okay, well, what is this Padre Pio thing? And this is early days in my what now looks like a salvific journey from my side. I was still egotistical on max. I was still grasping at straws. How do I hold on to what I've lost? How do I build a career again? And so when this director who I respected, I had known he made movies that I really loved. You know, Bad Lieutenant for me is one of the greatest performances ever made, and I know he's an actor's director, and the fact that there was this director reaching out to me, because at this point I'm nuclear. Nobody wants to talk to me, including my mother. The manager's not calling, the agent's not calling. I'm not connected to the business anymore. And so the fact that this man reached out to me felt like something like, in my egoic mind, wow, this is a miracle.
This is my chance.
This is my chance. This is my chance. And so my ego shows up, And now I'm like, yeah, well, Padre Pio. And my ego is what makes me research Pio. It's not my Catholicism or my yearnings towards God.
So you thought this would be a cool role for me to play.
Great, now I can get back on the horse. You know?
Yeah, okay.
And so I start researching Pio. And as I'm researching Pio, he tells me about his plans to make a movie, and he tells me that Willem Dafoe is going to be in the movie. And now I'm really in ego. Wait, so I can go from bottom barrel to working with Willem Dafoe? This is my chance, you know, back on the hustle, back on the ego.
Yeah.
And I start leaning into this thing, and he says, well, if you want to do this role, I need you to start researching. Go up and find I need you to go find a seminary, a Catholic
that's when
seminary.
you made your way up to San Lorenzo.
So the closest seminary to me,
Yeah.
living in Pasadena, was San Lorenzo. So
Yeah.
I drive up there, and I park my truck, and I start living in the parking lot. And I'm immersing myself in this world, and I'm sending videos back to Willem and Abel, who at the time were, you know, working on the script, and I'm falling into a group of men that met me in San Lorenzo, namely a guy named Brother Jude, who starts talking to me about the gospel. And he says, well, if you're going to play Pio, you need to read the gospel.
His fall is televised. Addictions fester in public view. Allegations of violence shake even his diehard fans. Society files him under irreparable and waits for the inevitable final headline. Redemption, if possible, will have to outshout a chorus of skepticism.
Most of these stories of saints in the faith were ups. Full-blown ups. They weren't perfect people who did perfect shit their whole lives and then wound up. Requirement
touched by God from the beginning, pooping gold, like
It wasn't that way.
Yeah.
The requirement for their sainthood was the up.
That they've been there.
They had to have experienced real negative shit in their life to be able to have this other thing, this salvation, this hero's journey. They're explaining saints to me. It's like the hero's path, you know. And I'm a writer. I'm in my head. You know, what is my hero's journey? I'm always asking myself, well, what? And this is sort of, and I always thought it was going to be through the craft. That my hero's journey was kid from the bottom, came to Hollywood with no fucking training, and now I'm like, you know, working with these people and this, and I'm doing that. And that was my hero's journey, and it was so curt. It was so blunt and lazy. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like this other thing that's available. And so you get around these dudes, and you hear about their path and how these guys got there.
Inside monastery walls, he confronts an uncomfortable truth. Suffering can destroy, but it can also refine. The scandal he caused becomes the very lens that shows him who he is and who he might become. Guilt turns into contrition. Contrition turns to purpose. The apostle reminds us, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28.
If you can tap into how you can use your suffering to help other people, that is maximum joy. I always thought joy was, oh, I get this and then I'm happy, or I do this and then I'm happy, or I get her and then I'm happy, or I make that and then I'm happy, or they respect me and then I'm happy. Or I always thought happiness was to be acquired by the things I would gain from life. That's why I was always grabbing. If I knew early on that happiness actually is in me offering all of my suffering up for other people as an instructive thing, or as something that could benefit man, then I maybe would have lived my life differently. So I guess the question I would ask anybody is how do you use your suffering to tap into your joy?
Stories like this remain jagged. There are apologies yet to be made, temptations still stalking, but grace specializes in unfinished people, meeting them mid-sentence and writing a better ending than they ever could. We hear the reassurance, but he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." 2 Corinthians 12:9. So maybe the real question isn't, why did I suffer? It's, what might God do with it now? If you've seen your own pain turn into purpose, share it below. These aren't just stories. They're rescue signals for someone else still out there. And if you're looking for more stories where grace meets ruin and writes a better ending, stay close. Subscribe. Testify. Hope again.